So we're going to look at the Nova Pro UHD Junior today. We'll start with the front panel, back panel. I'll take you through all the menus and then we'll jump into the software. So let's start with the front panel first. So now looking at the front panel, you have a power button on the very left side of it. You have a USB-B cable connector to connect to your computer to attach to the software. You have an input source button, which includes your display port, HDMI, SDI1, SDI2, and 4 DVI ports. Then you have a super nice TFT display screen in the middle. Right next to it you have a knob where you can navigate through the entire menu. Right next to that you have an escape button. Again, that helps you to go through the menus. And then you have a function buttons they're sort of shortcut buttons. You have a pip button that takes you to all the different layer settings. You have a scale button that automatically turns the auto scale on and off. And then you have a DVI mosaic and a function button that can assign to multiple different things, including changing the inputs. Now let's look at the back panel real quick. So looking at the rear panel, first on the top you have your inputs. You have 4 DVI inputs. 2 of them are DVI dual link inputs, which means they can do up to 4K 30 on each one of those. Your input number 2 and input number 4 are not 4K capable. They're not dual link. They're just regular 1080 DVI displays. Then you have your DisplayPort 1.2, DP 1.2 full DisplayPort port here. It does not have a loop out, but it is capable of doing 4K at 60. Same thing with HDMI 2.0, 4K at 60 with a loop out. Then you have 2 12G SDIs here right next to each other, SDI1 and SDI2. And as you can see, the SDI also has a loop outs on them. To the right of that you have a control section. In the control section you have your Ethernet connection to connect to a computer that can talk to multiple different softwares. On all-in-one controllers you have one more software that can communicate with it called VCAN, and also your Nova LCT and a smart LCT to control anything LED screen related. VCAN software lets you control the content that's going to the screen in the format that is being delivered in, as far as sizing, shapes, different layouts, using the pips, using the multiple layers that this device has to offer. All that could be done through VCAN. Then you also have your gen lock in and a loop out. Right next to it you have your RS-232. Again, this is not a Cat5 connection. It's just a Cat5 plug. It is not a network connection. You would need to have some sort of RS-232 converter to convert it to 9-pin DIN connection. Then you have your USB input and output. If you're controlling multiple processors using one single USB cable, you can just connect the computer to the first one and then loop out from here to the next one and the next one. Here on the right hand side we have a monitor. This is a beautiful feature. I use it all the time. In every rack we have a dual rack mount monitors. We use Marshall monitors. There's a bunch of them out there, obviously. I like to use HDMI input with the 1080p options on it. This monitor output shows exactly what is showing on the LED display itself. Right next to it we have a 4 optical output 10 Gbps ports. Now you only need 2 ports to transmit the full 16 port of a data signal that's coming out of the 4K here. Optical port 3 and 4 are exact copies of optical 1 and 2. As you can see, the little green and the blue icons, they match exactly. And right next to it you have a lockable OSHA connector for IEC power connection, and it ranges from 110 to 240 volts, 50 or 60 hertz, doesn't matter. It has auto converter inside, so you'll be safe to plug it in anywhere. Then you have your on and off switch right next to that. Underneath that you have all of your outputs connecting to LED display. Now these are 16 EtherCon outputs that are going straight to your LED screen, or you could use fiber outputs instead of the Cat5 outputs on these units. Now this unit does work in two different modes. One is ascending mode, which means it's going to send the signal, or the processor mode, which it's going to process all the signal and then send it out of this unit, Cat5, to the LED screen, or it can send it over fiber like I just mentioned. And then on the other end of that fiber, you can also use one more Nova Pro UHD Junior to receive that signal and use it as a fiber converter mode to convert that fiber into copper. Meaning you can just plug in the two fiber cables coming from one controller to the next over fiber, and then use the Cat5s out of that second unit to connect to the LED display. This is usually used for long runs at festivals or some sort of a permanent installations. Again, I would much rather use a CVT 4K, which could be bought for single mode or multi-mode fiber. Those units are much better used as a receiver, but if you were in a pinch and if you had to use one of the Nova Pro Ultra HD Juniors, you could use it in a send and receive mode. So just remember that. Now let's jump into our actual display of the processor itself, and we'll go from there. As we're looking at this front display, so you got this super nice TFT screen, which was hard to capture with the camera, but we'll try here. So as you can see on the top, you got the main layer, your picture-on-picture 1 layer and picture-on-picture 2 layer, and then there's also one more layer called the background. On the background layer, you can only use image or solid color, and we'll go through that in a little bit. You have your 16 ports connection diagram down here, or indicators. You have your 4 ports of optical indicators right here, and you also have all of your other features like a gen lock, background image, or if you have a network connection and whatnot. You also have your screen resolution and the brightness that's being used right now. This is not programmed controller at all. I just did a factory reset on it, so we'll get started from the top. So we have a knob here. Let's push on the knob. You get your screen brightness, obviously. Push it again and you can actually change your screen brightness. Then you have screen settings right below that. The screen settings, you can do a quick configuration. I'm going to go ahead and type in some random numbers here. Let's make it a 10 high. And we're going to do about 26. And I'll go ahead and make, okay, so 10 by 26. I'm going to stick to 26 per port. And data flow, we'll select going horizontal from the bottom. All right. So now, if we get out of it, you can see our screen size went from being 128 by 128 to 3328 by 1280. And we still have no signal on the display port because I'm using HDMI. So if I was to, if I was to go in here now and go into layer settings, in the layer settings go to main layer, it is already on. We're going to change our input source to HDMI and voila, we have a screen, and I'm recording the output so you can see it. Right now it's also set to custom resolution. We're going to change this custom to auto scaler. And you can see that's just scaling it onto the full-on LED screen. If you do pixel to pixel, you can see the difference in that as well. If you did custom resolution now, since our screen is 3300 and some pixels wide, you can see it's filling it up all the way now. Then you got your vertical height, obviously, if you wanted to extract that out. Your X and Y offsets, if you were gonna try and scroll it over. I'm just punching in some random numbers so you guys can actually see what's going on with the LED display here. Then you got your input crop. If you wanted to do an input crop, obviously your size has to be smaller on the display. So let's say if I want to take the logo and just fill it up all the way on the LED screen as much as possible. And you can see my XY offsets are still good. I'm just cropping in the image within that. So now I'm just filling up my logo to fill on the LED screen. And again, you might want to count out the pixels so you're not really stretching your logos and whatnot like I'm doing right now. This is just for educational purposes, so you guys can see exactly what's going on with it as I change the settings. So that's your layers. Then you can also assign a priority. So the way the priority works is if you have priority 1 is obviously a layer 1. On top of that, now if I was to enable a pip 1, so I can show you guys priority. So I have an SDI input coming in showing a small camera that's recording the actual front screen. I'm going to change that to SDI 1 and I'm going to enable this pip, and as you guys can see, that's on top of it now. And if I was to change a priority of this from 2 to 1, you can see that the priority 1 is basically a background layer. So the higher the number, the higher the priority it gets. So if you're assuming that priority 1 is on the top layer, that is not correct. Priority 1 is actually the background layer. Priority 2 is on top of that. Priority 3 is on top of that. And the background stays in the background no matter what. So that's the far more for this layer in the back. And you cannot modify that. So putting that on priority 2, it pops it up on top of that. And then you can also do a reset here if you wanted to reset a layer settings. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this pip off. For your background, you can do, like I said, either pure color or an image. So if you were doing a pure color, you can select a pure color background, whether it's red, green, or blue, and it's set with a 255 value. So right now it's on blue. If I wanted to make it green, make this 255 and make the blue 0. If you wanted to mix in the colors to make something, you can obviously change and play with these values. Then if you were doing an image, you can upload the image using the VCAN software, or you can capture an image using one of your inputs. So this is really helpful if you're using a pixel map on the LED screen. And if you don't want to keep that machine running, you can put this pixel map up by capturing it here. So to capture this, we're going to select a source as an HDMI. We're going to select our background. Where do we want to save it to? We have 4 slots to save that to. We're going to save it in background 1 and click apply. And this is going to take a few seconds to capture that source that's coming in, and it will save it in that slot. Give it a few seconds and it should be done any second now. There we go. So now we can set our background image to background 1. You can see that it's filled in right now. The other ones don't have anything in them, so they're completely grayed out. And there we have it. So now we got a background image. And status, I will turn it on so you guys can see also. There it is. Then we got the input settings. Here's where you can change your EDID settings for DisplayPort, HDMI, and DVI. For SDI, there's no EDID settings, so you're not going to get to do any of that. But if you go into one of this, you can select your standard EDIDs right here, scrolling through the list, or you can change it to custom and type in whatever you want there. You get your image mosaic. If you use multiple DVIs or whatever, you can change settings for that. On this machine you have 10 presets. So the preset saves any values of the picture-in-picture, scaling, sizing, sources you selected per layer. any of that settings could be saved on those 10 presets and easily recalled during the show. And you can recall it using a software through VCAN, or you can do it through the front panel. I'm going to go ahead and save this as a preset 1 just to show you guys. So right now we have 2 layers, as you can see on our screen. I'm going to go into our pip using our function button, turn on my picture in picture 1 to SDI, and now we have 3 layers. So using that 3rd layer now, I'll go back into our presets, save that as a preset 2, and then we're going to go ahead and recall our preset 1 and do load, and there you go, we're back to square one. And you can also like override the presets, or if you just do save over it, or you can do clear, or you can copy it to another preset if you wanted to save it for something else to make minor changes or whatever, if you wanted to just keep a backup copy of that preset in case it gets overridden by accident. Then you have your display control, where you can control all your normal, freeze, blackout, test pattern, and image colors, which is normal on any NovaStar processors. I'm not going to go too deep into that. Then you got your advanced functions. You got your HDR setup here. If you're using HDR 10, it will automatically detect this, and then you can play with those settings. I'm not using HDR content, so it's not going to let me do any of that. Low latency. There is a tutorial on NovaStar's YouTube channel. I highly suggest you watch low latency tutorial to give you the understanding, as it is not as easy as you would think. A lot of factors come into the play, as far as like what receiving cards you're using, what signals you're using, what processors you're using, and the whole process has to be supported with the hardware. So go ahead and watch that tutorial if you are more interested in that. Then you've got your optical mode as a hot backup or a copy. Then you have your 3D mode. Again, this 3D mode is if you're using a 3D content, you can go ahead and change that depending on the glasses you're using. You should be able to do side by side, or top and bottom, or frame sequential. It just depends on the glasses that you have. And here you can see the priority you can set per eye. Then you got a self test here. Now this may it may take a few minutes. Again, you don't want to do that unless if you really have issues with the processor itself. You can run a self diagnostics on it. Then you got your general settings as far as a hot backup as a primary. Your synchronization, right now we have it on off. You can turn it on, and you can change your sources to get your clock signal from one of the input sources, for example, or you can use a gen lock. If you're using HDMI or something, I highly suggest, if you're using HDMI on multiple processors from the same source, I highly suggest you use HDMI source as your gen lock. That will help lock it to the same clock. FN right now, which is a function button key, it can do multiple things like I mentioned earlier. And here's a list of things that you can have it do. So as soon as you push a button, it will take you directly to test pattern, for example, or if it will black it out, whatever is more useful for you, you can go ahead and select that button. Then you got return to home in 60 seconds automatically. Meaning if you just left it on this display, after 60 seconds it will show back up on your home screen. You can do your factory reset in here in the general settings. This is something new. Factory reset used to be on the outside menu, now it is not. So it's hiding in the general settings if you guys are looking for it. In About Us, you got the website, support email address, and the hardware version. So you should always check your firmware version to see if there is any. If you need it, you should update it. If you don't, do not update it. Then you got your partial reset. Now what the partial reset does, it resets all your layers. It doesn't reset anything else. So if you're looking at factory reset, go into general settings, don't do partial reset. Then you got your communication settings. Communication mode, I want to change it to LAN preferred. My network settings, I have default IP address 192.168.0.10. If you are using a wireless router or wired router that has a DHCP in it, I suggest you go ahead and do auto. Then you got your working mode, if you're using it as a video controller or fiber converter. So if you're using it as a sender, keep it on a video controller. If you're using it to catch the fiber, converting it to copper over Cat5, you should use fiber converter mode. Then you got your languages, obviously English and Chinese, and that's it. That's your entire menu.